Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make books and courses for other potters who want to be more environmentally friendly in their pottery making. And that's what this podcast is all about. And I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson, and in today's episode, it's very exciting. We're going to be glazing our mug that we with the glaze that we made in the last episode. So this mug, we've got our mug. It's now bone dry, so it means that it's basically completely dried out. I have sponged it a little bit just to kind of try and make it, just try and like take any sharp edges off, like kind of finishing it off. So I sponged it and then I let it dry again. So it's completely, so it's kind of like exactly the form I want in terms of like, I've sponged away all of those kind of brush marks and I've made sure that the base is nice and sort of like rounded in terms of there's no sharp corners at all in there. And I've made sure the rim is kind of how I want it. So I've done a little sponge and then let it dry again. So that's the stage we're going to raw glaze at. Um, the bone dry stage. So some potters, I've read in books and stuff that they can raw glaze at the leather hard stage, but I find that the porosity of bone dry clay is quite similar to kind of bisque fired clay, and so it's kind of like I found it personally like the easiest stage to raw glaze at as opposed to like the leather hard stage, but that's also an option if you did want to like sort of experiment with it and stuff. But okay, so we've we made our glaze last episode, and I've been letting this glaze like settle, and you can see that it's kind of settled into like there's a kind of a couple of inches of water on the top. It's in this kind of glass jar which is used for passata, and then it's got about sort of 4 inches or sort of 10 centimeters of glaze on the bottom. So it's almost half and half of like glaze and water. And when I made this, I said to you in the episode that it was a bit watery. I could tell it was a tiny bit watery to raw glaze with, because I want the glaze, when I'm raw glazing, I want the glaze to be a little bit thicker than if I was going to be glazing bisqueware, and that's because the clay at the raw, if you're raw glazing something and it's and your pot is bone dry, that clay will be trying to slake down, it will be trying to disintegrate. If it touches water, it's going to be on its way to disintegrating. So we want to kind of make sure that we're glazing with the kind of the minimum possible water, but we still kind of want the glaze to be not too thick on the pot, and we want it to go on like nice and evenly. We don't want like too thick a glaze. So it's quite tricky, and like you can kind of experiment with it. Maybe it's too thin, and your pot starts disintegrating, or it's too thick and it doesn't look nice on the pot, or it's crazes or something. So yeah, so again, it's like it's pottery is all about like experimenting all the time. But I just could feel that glaze was a little bit thin, so it's kind of more like a kind of like a maybe like a thin cream kind of consistency, and I want maybe just ever so slightly thinner than like a double cream kind of consistency. Maybe that's too thick to describe it, but a bit thinner than double cream. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pour off this water on the top. We don't need our FFP3 face mask because we've finished making our glaze, so there's no powder in the atmosphere. We're not creating powder dust because all the powder's now incorporated into our glaze. But what I'm going to do is I'll just move the mug so that I don't like knock it off. That would be a shame. Um, okay, so I've got just like a jug, like a plastic jug, and then I'm going to just pour off this top water very carefully from the glaze. So this is what's so great about like when glazes settle. So it's just taking a few days to set. It's taken it. I've come back to this after a few days, but it doesn't take a few days to settle. It just literally just like pouring off the top layer of water. And then what I'm going to do is put the lid on, and I'm just going to give it a shake and to mix it all up. And hopefully it's not too thick still. Just try and get all of the glaze there. Just gonna yeah, shake the jar. That's what's really cool about making glaze in a jar. You can just like shake it. But if you were making this in a bucket or something, you could scoop the water off with like a scoop, say like like a garden scoop, or a spoon. You could use that as well. You could even sponge it off, like saturate a sponge and squeeze it out. Saturate a sponge and squeeze it out. Um, so Yeah, and then what we're going to do is if it's too thick, we can then add some of this water back in again. So we can just save this water to the side. So I've got a bowl here, which is just like a plastic bowl, but it's got a like a pouring lip, and that's really helpful for like when you're glazing. So I'm going to just pour the glaze out, and I just want to see how thick it is. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see like this pouring on the YouTube video, but basically it's kind of now this consistency of like cream. Yeah, I'd say that's double cream. So actually that's a tiny bit thick. So what we'll do is we'll just put it back into the jar. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit thick. Okay. So let's just we're gonna add a tiny bit of water, just a little splash of water. And then we're gonna mix up again. And then hopefully it's the right consistency. Okay. Don't want to add too much water and then have to wait for it to settle again and then but if that happens, that's fine. You just have to wait for it to settle again and then do the same process again. So I'm going to pour it out now. Oh yeah, that's absolutely perfect. So I'd say that's now a bit like kind of single cream type kind of consist viscosity, but maybe a tiny bit thicker. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to glaze our pot. So with raw glazing, we want to just like the only difference really in terms of like if you're raw glazing something that's say like bone dry, then if you're glazing something that's bisqueware, it's just that it's a lot less strong, basically. The greenware is a lot less strong. So, and like I said, we don't want to be oversaturating it. So those are the two things to consider. So, say, like for example, you would normally use like glazing tongs or something to, to hold your pot and like dip it into the glaze. That would probably like crush a greenware pot. So we want to probably be glazing like, by hand. We're going to be pouring glaze in, pouring glaze out, pouring glaze over, maybe slightly dipping a pot. um, Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze the inside of the pot first. I'm going to pour the glaze in, swill it around, pour it out, and then I'm going to let that pot dry before glazing the rim. So I'm actually not going to glaze the whole of this mug. I want to have glaze on the rim so that I can like have a nice kind of place to like drink from that's all glazed. And also it will, if I glaze over the top of the handle, so if I glaze over this top of the handle join, or even the whole top of the handle join, right down to the kind of like the midpoint of maybe not the midpoint, maybe sort of like a third down in terms of the handle, that will create a really nice kind of decorative kind of stripe of glaze all along the top. So the glaze, the inside will be glazed, and then this kind of say about like 3 centimeters down, like an inch and a half down. The pot will be glazed as well. And I think that will be like, yeah, really nice in terms of like drinking from it, but it's not going to like oversaturate the pot with glaze. Now, I could glaze this whole pot. The pot would probably withstand kind of just being on its rim. And if I wanted to glaze the outside, you could just pour the glaze around it, over it. But I just know that like the more glaze you kind of have on a raw glaze pot, the more you have to say, for example, you splash the glaze on the base, you would then have to wipe the glaze off the base. And like, that's definitely an option. But each time you're wiping, you're wiping the clay away rather than the glaze. You're wiping the clay and the glaze away. So I just know it's kind of like a bit more effort, and all I really want to do is get that top rim section like glazed. So yeah, so I'm going to be dipping it in. So I'm going to be glazing the inside, then I'm just going to be dipping the top bit in to and then that's all I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it at two different times. So right, let's get going with glazing. Bit nervous actually. Bit nervous because I want this to work. So how should we do this? Right, what we'll do is we'll use our bottle, our jar, to kind of pour the glaze into the pot, into the mug, and then we'll swill it round and then we'll pour it out into the bowl. Okay. So I'm going to just maybe move this camera so that you can see a little bit down. There we go. So again, I'm using the wheel head as a table. Not ideal. Probably probably better to use an actual table. um, but just yeah, just it's the right height and then it is hopefully like you can see this and stuff. So okay, right, I'm just going to sit up so I can do this like. So hopefully, yeah, hopefully you can see that. Okay, so gonna pour it in, swill it around, pour it out. Okay. So there we go. So it's already started to kind of like dry into the clay. And you can see there's been a drip down the side and stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe that drip away now. And it's gone over the handle as well, and that's fine. We're just going to wipe that off because I want like a really nice clean line for when we glaze. I want all of that glaze off really, so that then when we dip it in, when I dip it in for the kind of the finishing kind of rim glazing, that it will make a nice clean line and we won't have any like drips and stuff. So I'm actually just going to take the glaze water that I poured off. It's literally just water. So I'm just going to use that, recycle that, and just kind of rub this glaze off around the rim. Because if I don't rub it off around the rim, then it'll be like kind of almost like double thickness in that section. I don't really want that because I want it to be all the same thickness. So just because it dripped down one bit, it's going to mean that it will be like double thickness when it comes to actually like dipping it in again. So don't really want that. So because I want it to be, it will just help it to look like really even when it's fired. We'll just wipe it off the handle. So yeah, it's really important that I let this dry. You can see that it's wet. I hope you can see that on the camera. It's kind of created this wetness on the pot. And we want that to be completely dry before we then, glaze it again. Um, yeah, so just wiping this away and it's kind of coming off and it looks good. Okay, so that's kind of all the glaze that went a bit like where I didn't want it to go, all kind of wiped off. That was quite good actually. Okay, and then we do have a nice smooth glaze inside. And yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that's going to create a really nice layer of glaze. Hopefully not too thick, not too thin. Okay, so I'm gonna put this. It's actually a sunny day today. It's been quite warm in Oxford recently, so I'm gonna put this in the sun just to let it dry out. I always say to you, like, don't put things in the sun to dry out, but just the sun is very gentle at the moment. It's very early in the morning, so it'll be okay. And this pot, it's not being wetted too much, so I literally just want to like dry it out quickly so I can do the next stage with you. And that'll just be yeah, like I said, dipping the pot into some glaze to get a nice band around the top. So join me back here after that pot's dried. I'm going to give it maybe an hour and then I'll come back to you and then yeah, we'll do the next stage and then it'll be done. Hello. Okay, so welcome back. This is part two, where we're going to do the little bit of glaze around the rim. So this pot, the mug, has been drying for about an hour, and it's kind of just stabilized it. So I don't want it, obviously we don't want to like over wet it. So it just enables it to then go through this next stage, sort of afresh without like disintegrating. Well, to reduce the risk of it disintegrating as much as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour glaze into a vessel, which I found that what I've so I don't have that much glaze. If you had, made loads of glaze, so you find you could kind of use any vessel you wanted, a really big bowl or something. You're just dipping the rim into it. But because because I don't have that much glaze, I've had to pick the kind of smallest vessel I can that still fits. It's got a nice flat base. So just put this sort of got a ceramic bowl here. It's like a sort of salad bowl. It's got a nice flat base. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the glaze into this vessel, and then I'm just going to dip my mug into it, and it just about fits because yeah, so if I had loads of glaze, this wouldn't be a problem. I could use a really nice big one, and I wouldn't have to worry about like knocking the handle on the side of the bowl or anything like that. But because I've hardly got any, I just need the smallest possible one that still fits the mug, and then we can do that line of glaze. So hopefully I will actually have enough glaze. So we'll see how it goes. So what I need to do is I need to mix this glaze up again because it's settled. So I'm just going to shake it in the jar again. Um, Obviously, if you have your glaze in a bucket, you're just going to stir it with a spatula. It's really, really good. Some people use like a wooden stick or something, or a wooden spoon. That's really good as well. I'm just going to pour it into this bowl, into the vessel that I'm going to use, and I really hope this is enough. We'll see. Might not be, but anyway, let's just give it a go. So I'm going to dip my mug rim into the glaze, and I want to be, so I'm holding it onto the base. Holding the mug by the base, and I'm just going to dip it straight in, and it's probably going to like touch the base of the bowl that I'm dipping it into, and then I'm going to draw it straight up again. And then I want to kind of wait upside down, because if I switch it to the right way up too soon, any wet glaze will just run down the side. I don't really want that. So um let's give it a go. So I'm just going to dip it in now. Eh, That went okay, but I don't know if you saw, but a bubble came out of the glaze. So that it kind of then popped and then made a kind of uneven place on the side of the pot. So that can happen. I can just sponge that away to make a kind of uh more like a kind of even line around the side. Uh, I mean, perhaps if I'd put it in a little bit at an angle, that would have helped that. I mean, that's okay to have it not quite like perfectly straight around the side. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Again, I'm just using the water that I actually took off the glaze, took off the glaze, and just recycling that water. I'm just gonna wipe it a bit more just to get a really nice, like straight line as much as possible. Okay, so that glaze it's dried now, and we've got an interesting thing that's happened actually, which I want to, yeah, be good to show you. So because there were bubbles, I think when we put it face down, there were some bubbles, which has meant that the rim of the pot is actually got some little patches where it's not glazed, and we don't want that to go in the kiln without those patches being glazed. So we need to cover those up. So let me show you how to do that. What we're going to do is we're just going to paint on with a paintbrush just to cover those little bubbles. Actually, painting on probably isn't quite the right way of describing it. We're going to just literally um, kind of dab on the glaze just to cover those bubbles up. So hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to take the glaze in that's already in the bowl. It's already mixed up. Just go down a little bit so you can see it a bit better, and you can see those little bits which are not glazed on the rim. And we really don't want this to go in the kiln without those bits glazed. But what we're going to do is just dab the glaze on. So we're not really painting it. We're literally just dabbing it. Painting would be kind of maybe a too abrasive kind of action. So that's great. I'm happy with that. And then doesn't have to be even in terms of like, so for example, you can be thinking, oh no, it's like it's not even enough, you can see kind of the little drips and stuff like that. But in the kiln, quite often these drips, more often than not, these drips just kind of even out. So when the glaze is actually being like fired, melting, these little drips will just even all out. So yeah, so there we go. We've actually done it. We've actually glazed our mug. So you can see that the mug is it's glazed. Like I mean, ideally I would have liked it a tiny bit more glazed down the side of the pot, but we just don't have enough glaze for that. So that's something to kind of think about for me. Like oh okay, next time if I'm just making a little bit of glaze, maybe I make like 500 grams of glaze and that would just give a little bit more and then it would kind of be deeper and then it would have gone down the pot a little bit more and maybe covered this join of the top of the handle sort of if you know what I mean, the underneath of the top of the handle. So as it is, it's just covering the very top of the handle, but that's a really crucial join to cover because sometimes you can get like a little cosmetic cracking. Like I actually noticed I had like a tiny little cosmetic crack there, and it's really good just to have that all like glazed over. So just to really add strength to it. And then the rest of the pot is going to be not glazed at all. Now, obviously, if you're making a mug or something, you can paint on whatever you want. You could paint on some glaze. You could even, if you're thinking, in terms of like a few episodes ago, we were actually making this, at the leather hard stage, you can add things like you can add sprigs from sprig molds. You could push something into, you could kind of create a texture, like push something into the mug design. But I just wanted like a really, really like into the clay. I just wanted like a really, really simple design that I could just, yeah, just to show you how simple it can be and how beautiful actually. Really simple, like really simple. Uh, I've just noticed another little spot. I'm just gonna paint over. A little spot of no glaze. Yeah, just how simple this is. We're just literally making a mug, making a really simple glaze, just dipping it in, just not even glazing all of it. So this body of the mug, which is like just clay, that will fully vitrify in the kiln because we're going to fire it straight up to stoneware temperatures, and that will be really beautiful. Kind of be like a sort of a kind of creamy white color, which will be like matte in terms of the surface, and that will really kind of juxtaposition with the really shiny glaze that we've got on the inside and on the rim, and it will just look so beautiful, but be very subtle. It kind of so it's sort of like a kind of transparency glaze that we're using, and then this lovely kind of matte on the body of the pot. And because it's getting fired up to stoneware, it's going to be fully vitrified, so we don't have to worry about like it being like porous, and also we've glazed the inside of that mug, so it's going to be like completely watertight, and we're going to be able to have a cup of tea, a tea bag cup of tea really soon. This just needs to be fired, and in the next episode I will show you how to do that. So we're going to be packing the kiln in the next episode, and then the one after we're going to be firing it, and I will show you exactly what it looks like as a finished mug. So until then, wishing you very, very happy potting, and I'll see you then. Goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me on that episode. And if you want to find out more about eco friendly pottery, head over to the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. Can't wait to see you there.